Hello, my name is Claire and I am doing a senior project on watercolor. Because of this, I decided to duplicate the palette that I use at home so that I have one for use in school. I ordered the Mijello palette off of Amazon, and as you can see, it is very similar to my main palette. The main difference between the two palettes is the location of the tabs that hold the watercolor pans into place. The tabs are separated on my main palette, whereas on the Mijello palette, the tabs are back to back. However, the back of both palettes are exactly the same. One thing I noticed with my Mijello palette was that the tin was bent, causing it to wobble on the table. With a little brute force and bending, I warped it back into place. I then started customizing my palette. The first thing I did was remove the tray that holds the pan. This made it easier for me to grip the palette as I removed the flap that contains extra wells. I did this by pulling out the metal bar that keeps the flap attached to the case. I then put the bar back in the loops just in case I ever want to reattach the flap. I removed the flap because I don't typically use it. When you mix on metal, the water beads up and you cannot get an accurate representation of the color. I then replaced the tray and started preparing my pans. For me, this process starts with measuring out magnets for the bottom of my pans. While the tabs hold the pans in place pretty well, the magnets on the bottom prevent them from sliding around. I use business card sized magnets and trace the pans onto the backing of the magnet, then cut them into small rectangles. In my old palette, I had two different labeling systems. One for my Mijello paints and another for my Winsor and Newton paints. In this palette, I want the labeling to be the same. Both sides are labeled on the right with the color name or the watercolor brand's color number. The short sides are labeled similarly, but slightly different. One side is labeled with an abbreviation for the brand, and the other is labeled with an abbreviation and a color number. The short side that has no bump from when the pan was molded has both the abbreviation and the color number. The bottom of the pan is labeled with a brand abbreviation and the color name or number. After the pan is fully labeled, I peel off the backing paper and attach the magnets that I cut out earlier to the bottom of the pan. I then proceeded to repeat this process until I had labeled all my pans. The Mijello palette has space for 48 pans, 5 of which I have designated as interchangeable slots. This means that I have 5 slots on my palette for pans that I switch out whenever I wish to, such as if I buy a new tube of paint or want to use another pan that I already own. At the end of this video, you can see that I have filled out the last 5 slots with 3 fall colors and 2 colors I want to get to know better. Once all the pans are labeled, it is time for the most satisfying part. My first professional watercolors were the Mijello Mission Gold 32 tube set, which is why most of my palette is Mijello. I stored my other watercolor paints and some tubes of gouache in this beautiful mooncake tin. The other watercolor brands I use are Sennelier, Schmincke, and Horadam. I think my favorite brand might be Sennelier. Finally, we've reached the part you've probably been waiting for this entire video. I squeeze some paint into each pan, enough to fill it halfway, then use a needle to mix the paint and spread it. I like it when my paints touch all 4 walls of the pans, because I feel like if they have that much contact, they are less likely to crack off and fall out. You'll notice that some of the pans are already filled. These are my Winsor and Newton paints. Because I already had pans filled with my Winsor and Newton paints, I decided to just pop them in the slots instead of making brand new pans. Some paints are incredibly thick. To remedy this, I add a few drops of gum arabic, then mix them. Other paints have separated from their binder in the tube, which is the yellowish liquid coming out of this tube. Ironically, this is gum arabic, which is the same compound I mixed into the paint that was too thick. Lastly, some paints are prone to cracking and peeling away from the walls of the pans. For these paints, I add a drop of honey, then mix thoroughly with a needle. I hope you enjoyed watching me set up this palette. Thank you for watching.